Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, having a very special guest, Edward McKeown. Edward, how are you doing today?
I'm cool. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm excellent. Anytime I get to interview an author and chit chat before my writing session, it definitely helps, kind of start that writer brain for me. Yeah, I just find if I write beforehand, it doesn't work as well. So I usually just save for after a chat. It's like almost like I did my mile warm up before, going on a marathon run or something like that. And just always gets the brain working a little bit different. But I know I appreciate you coming today. I know our audience appreciates you coming today and talking to us about, your books and your writing journey. But yeah, we can't wait to get started and to check out your products today.
Well, thank you. I hope everybody finds something that they enjoy and are interested in my work.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I'm sure we will. So we're going to check out that first question there for you, my friend. What has your writing journey been like up until this point?
It's probably been a little bit like everybody else's, which is unplanned chaos, wandering around, occasionally finding yourself in deep swamps, chased by wolves, and a variety of other such
I
things.
feel that.
Yeah, because I don't think anyone starts a writing journey with any real knowledge of what's ahead of them. As Tolkien said, the road goes ever on, and your feet just go on it, trying to keep up. But you have no idea, what's around the next hill. For myself, I've always been interested in writing, and I wrote some short stories as a kid, and actually wrote a Star Trek fan fiction piece
Oh, cool.
set right after the Wrath of Khan, where I had everybody dealing with the loss of Spock, and then Spock came back. So that went into the dumpster, but nothing in the writing world is completely gone. Because some of the characters I developed and some of the thoughts that I had about a starship on a journey made its way into my own starship journey, which was
That's cool.
the Privateer series, which is the first series that I wrote, beginning with the book Was Once a Hero.
That's awesome.
That was the start of an interesting journey. And I don't know where you draw your inspirations from, where and when they hit you, but that one came to me, as most of them do, as an image or actually out of a dream. In that case,
Oh, cool.
of a red starship kind of sailing over a world that I knew was dead, but I didn't know why it was dead. And from there, I started to populate that starship with the people that would find out why. And next thing I knew, I had committed trilogy. So
I know that feeling so well.
Mhm. That's
That's
often
awesome.
the case with my stuff, which is that the series that you see behind me is the Morrow series, which is the one that I'm probably best known for. 10 books and two 5-book cycles of an AI's journey, an alien-made AI's journey of self-exploration. She reactivates on an asteroid after 50,000 years. And that started as a short story. And in fact, she was not in the short story. The short story was something different for me. I was attempting to do something very gritty and noir and a little frankly sexual. And that short story got the same reaction from every woman in my life. They universally hated it. So I retooled it, and into that short story wandered this kind of Japanese anime inspired character, this little AI robot. And the short story sort of took off. And I had certain thoughts about that character. I kind of envisioned her as kind of a sidekick for the what I thought was the main character at the time.
Yeah.
And she had different thoughts. The Moral series, and I don't know if you've had this experience where your characters essentially start writing the novel for you and you just write.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Never more so than with this character. I thought she was a sidekick, and she informed me somewhat frostily that she was a very serious person with questions about existentialism and the meaning of love. And I realized that I'd better listen to her because she was telling a better story than the one I was thinking of. And out came My Outcast State. And I thought that was just going to be one novel, and it ended up being 5 in the cycle. And then I realized that this character, because of the life and existence that she would lead, there were certain issues that would come into her, who wants to live forever. And that spawned the second 5-book cycle that done. And now we're working on a collection of short stories that occur mostly between the original books and the first
Oh, cool.
cycle, which makes it a real easy start for anybody. When I write, and I don't know if this is an experience for you, but I always feel each book in a series has to be a complete and independent adventure. You know,
Mm.
there's nothing worse than getting a book and realizing you had to have read the ones before to get anything out of this. So while all my books contribute to individual arcs, which is pretty much standard for the way I do things, each one has to be its own story, or I kind of feel cheating reading.
No, I totally get that. I had a character for my prequel novella trilogy. I thought she'd just be like a throwaway character to get my
Mhm.
character somewhere, my main character, and then she very quickly was like having more depth, and I was like, oh, oh. And then all of a sudden, she like said something to me, and she was like, well, I'm actually in this part, and I'm actually in the whole series, and I was like, I thought you were just in this prequel novella. She's like, no, not only am I in the whole trilogy, but I'm like, I'm not a secondary character. I'm a main character. I was like, holy crap. And then,
Mhm.
yeah, she just kept spinning. I was like, God, I talked to some of my friends about it and like two of my best friends, and they're like, dude, that's so much better. I'm like, I know. But I'm like, then I had to like go and like redo all this stuff. But it's funny because then I separated my first prequel novella for main characters, like his arc, his first part of the arc. And like I have her like mention
Mhm.
spoilers, I've talked about this, but like I actually don't like you actually start novella two with her story. And
Mhm.
all the women, especially that have read her the first part of novella prequel novella one, they're like, oh, I feel so cheated. Like I have to read novella two now. I was like, and there we go. I was like, that's marketing for you. But yeah, I totally get it. Sometimes they just don't want to do what you want them to do. But I think I always talk to authors about that, and it just seems like that's your subconscious, right? Trying to help you write a better story. So I think that's smart on your part for listening. I've never had anybody who has listened to their characters, regret it. Maybe again, I understand that every time I talk about a short story, my friends like, you have no idea what short means.
Yeah,
Like I'm not a 100K guy. Yeah.
short, and that's a pretty muscular short story by today's standard. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's like mine. I was like, I actually divided up my next project. I divided it up into like to 10K, almost like pretty evenly with chapters. So I know exactly right like what I got to do to hit. And I'm like trying to keep to that. But I was like, my buddy, he goes, who I'm doing this anthology with, he's like, you cannot go over. He's like, 10K is your limit, dude. He's like, I want you to do one word less, actually. So I'm gonna really try to focus on that. But I totally get both of those feelings. Sometimes it's just kind of how it goes. But I am curious though, when you talked about fan fiction, and like I had this, and Carol and I, like, our episode just came out in present day February when we're recording this week, and we talked about writing like Eberron fan fiction essentially and Forgotten Realms, and then for particular contests and stuff. And that's how I got writing. And I loved the books, and I found out about their contests. That's what Wizards of the Coast used to do. And I got to say, like, he turned that fan fiction into his current series. And then that's what I did with one of my fantasy series and worlds that I first wrote a trunk novel of mine that I'm going to finish at some point and then go back to that world. But for me, like, I never realized it was fan fiction, and I actually never realized like how much I learned from writing fan fiction. So I'm just curious, like, and we have a lot of people that have come on in terms of science fiction who have written Star Trek fan fiction in particular. But I'm curious, like, what's like the number one lesson that you learned from writing that fan fiction, do you think? Or maybe one piece of advice you could give people who are trying that same type of thing?
Use your own characters.
Mm,
Don't try to reinterpret the existing characters. You won't do it as well. And if you bring in, as I did, two new characters, their observations of the other characters and their relationships can be unique and interesting and fun.
mm,
You get new eyes on an old subject. But if you try to write as one of the existing characters, I generally have found that pretty unsuccessful. Even talented authors like James Blish and Alan D. Foster, who did interpretations of Star Trek, I really didn't feel that they hit them. Blish tried to do an independent novel. It really did not feel like Star Trek. So
yeah.
if you're going to do it, I would suggest that you do your own POV character. And this way you also have a great deal more freedom, which when you're writing in somebody else's playpen is a big issue. I kind of helped get started the In Hell series that was very popular back in the 1990s. And I was working with those guys, and I said to them, well, you missed a big opportunity. You should have done Lawyers in Hell. And next thing I know, this thing is taking off around me, and they demanded a story. And I wrote in that series for about 3 or 4 of the books. But what I found very confining was that they didn't allow for redemption, they didn't allow for character to change. And in consequence, to me, you lost a lot of good storytelling. Well, I didn't because I broke all the rules and did all that anyway. But after a while, I realized that that was probably not going to be allowed to go on for too much longer. So I left while the leading was good and while the stories were good. But I decided thereafter I was never really going to play in anybody else's sandbox because I wanted to go where the books and the characters took me.
Yeah.
And sometimes, as you said earlier, it's a little bit conversation. You were talking about talking to your characters. And of course, we're actually, working through our subconscious. But I had one incident where my character Mauro did something in the second book, and my wife asked me, "Well, why did she do that?" And I looked at her and said, "She hasn't told me yet." And that's that I lied down with a cool rag on my head for an hour. But eventually, in book 4, I realized what she had done, and it made perfect sense. So yeah, you can think of it as your subconscious, but it's more fun to think that your imaginary friend is playing with you and telling you stuff.
Well, the coolest thing I think I love Robert E. Howard, and not saying there's not issues, like everybody's got issues. I'm sure my stuff's gonna have issues, because I'm a flawed individual, but like I'm hoping to do my best. Yeah, yeah. But like I thought it was so interesting when they redid the comics with Dark Horse redid them in early 2000s, and it was like right after, I think it was like the first chunk, right? It must have been like the second graphic novel, like so the second, whatever they clumped those into. And it was so cool though, because like the last issue of that graphic novel, the individual issue, in the back they would always have I loved the history of authors, particularly Robert E. Howard, and it had talked about a story of his friend, one of his best friends, talked about going on his front porch, and like he'd come up, and Robert would be like daydreaming and like writing, right? And he said that at times when he would interrupt him, in his writing sessions, it was almost as if he was listening to Conan talk. And if you look at the stories with how they're written, they're very episodic, right? Sometimes some are in this chunk, the pirateering, some are in this part, where he's, trying to do, and he said it was almost as if when he wrote the stories, it was like Conan was just, hey, did I ever tell you about the time that I did this thing? Just like a friend would. And that like really struck me.
Like
And I
he's
never really,
loincloth with the beer going, "Hey, how about that time at Hyperborea?"
it struck me so much, and I was like, oh, like, because I always wondered why didn't he write him in order, And I was like, that made total sense. But it was so interesting, and I didn't understand until this particular character from my urban fantasy series, was telling me, hey, and I'm like, I totally get it now. But I thought, what a cool connection. And then I remembered, and I actually read the back of the comic book back in the day when they actually had good stuff back there, I feel. But yeah, it was like, it really hit me. So I totally get that. I'll tell my wife, and she'll kind of give me a look. And then I'll talk to my author friends. They're like, oh yeah, I totally get that. So yeah, we're all just crazy, I guess. But at least it's fun along the way, right? And you get some cool stories out of it. I know we talked a little bit about genre, but what genres do you currently write in, and why?
Well, I've had a lifelong love of science fiction. Started when I started reading Andre Norton's work, who really probably is my strongest single influence.
Oh,
But
cool.
I would say that C.J. Cherry is kind of right on her
Mm.
heels. And these people opened my mind to the possibilities. Then there's the original Star Trek series. There are the great black and white episodes of The Twilight Zone, The Outer Limits.
Okay.
Even Lost in Space, when it was black and white, was a pretty decent series.
I
So
love that series.
yeah, so you had all this great stuff there, and I felt like I wanted to be a part of it. The first short story I wrote was actually a fantasy piece that I wrote, I think, in high school. And then, later on, I revisited. I really didn't start writing seriously till later in life. And some of it's, I think, accumulating life experiences,
Yeah.
accumulating the skills. And then, of course, there's a thing about, not starving to death, liking to live indoors and eat off of plates. So, we all have to make a living too.
Yeah.
Science fiction was the first love. Urban fantasy is kind of the second one, because urban fantasy is fun. It's a kind of a unique genre. I mean, when you look at Tolkien and Howard and C.S. Lewis, they're creating whole universes, and they create races, they create languages. Most importantly, they create magic systems that make some sort of sense, that impose some sort of limitations on the storytelling. Urban fantasy kind of catches you betwixt and between.
Yeah.
You have to be anchored enough in this world and not do it so improbably that people get to that bullshit moment where they go, I'm, pulling the eject lever and popping out of your story. One of the most successful series on that was Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah.
It,
Yep.
it mixed in that little bit of sardonic humor because if you look at it, Sunnydale High School had a casualty rate like the battalion in close contact with the enemy for weeks on end.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
don't you think people would notice that, of the original starting class of 500, 35 of them made it out? Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's the improbabilities pile on each other in fantasy, or particularly urban fantasy, and you have to be really careful of it. So when I do Night in Charlotte, it's this series over here. Let's see if this will actually show.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, and it's urban fantasy set in the city I live in now, where I have a lot of fun at the expense of the city and its institutions, and what my lawyers say is a non-actionable way. So, you can take a button down, banking town like Charlotte and inhabit it with demonic bankers, and probably all bankers are kind of demonic, sexy vampires who try to stay under the radar. And you have that little thing that occurs in the outer limits and the Twilight Zone where you can turn a corner in the normal world and suddenly not be in the normal, and yet it is not so improbable that it just overwhelms your sense of reason, or that how would the world continue to go on if the powers knew that evil was supernatural, evil was a fact.
Hmm.
So urban fantasy a little bit, primarily science fiction. I've thought about high fantasy, as they call it, but again, it really feels daunting. How do you approach that genre, which seems so fully occupied by, Tolkien and Michael Moorcock, who did Elric of Melniboné? What new? And this is a little bit of a mistake that writers can fall in. So we will warn all you writer types out there. You don't have to do something absolutely new. You don't have to do something unprecedented. You just have to do something in an interesting fashion. And we're all basically retelling the Iliad, to be honest. But that said, I haven't found the lever that would give me a good, worth writing, worth reading fantasy story. If I ever do, I'll tackle it. Meanwhile, I'm having fun with the Knight and Charlotte series. I've got a third book in that series, which will be coming out this year. And
Oh, cool.
I have other books, but we'll get back to that later, coming out in the science fiction world.
No, it's awesome. I totally get that though. Like, so for me, yeah, like I teaching history, I'm like, oh, I loved Kevin Hearn,
Mm-hmm.
Iron Druid Chronicles. My friend, sorry, Tyler, tried getting me to read it for years, and I was like, urban fantasy is not my thing. He's like, but you love druids, and I'm like, yeah, and I put it off for so long, and I passed by those Patricia Briggs books for years. I still remember almost every cover of the Dresden Files when I first
Mm-hmm.
saw it. And my grandfather at the time was in a particular stint for a few years in and out of the hospital, and it was like they always sold those at the gift shop. So I remember like seeing them quite often. And there's like a couple others, but like yeah, I just decided my friend when I was moving to Arizona for a job, I had seen him. He's like, dude, you really got to try this series. So he bought me like book one or whatever. And I got down there, and when I found out that like Tempe was right next to us, and then it was like really cool where Kevin at the time had lived in Tempe and was writing about all these places. So we went to his favorite restaurant, got the fish and chips at Rula Bula, just like really cool stuff. Went to Flagstaff where he fought a monster at like a ski resort and stuff. So it was really fun. But that for me, like I was like, oh, here's history, here's fantasy, but it's set in our world. And I just did not think that some of those, the magic system was going to be as good. So I'm glad that I gave that one a shot. I actually got to meet Kevin later that year. I met him, Brandon Sanderson, Patrick Rothfuss, Pierce Brown, Michael J. Sullivan, Brian McCullen, like 10 other amazing traditional and indie authors at the Poison Pen. And that just like completely changed my perception. And I talked to a lot of them about indie in particular. And it was just really interesting. So yeah, urban fantasy for me, that really opened up reading and writing for it too. Yeah, so I
No,
think
the danger there is that when you're writing urban fantasy, particularly in your own hometown, that the restaurant that you had sort of serving as their the neutral meeting ground between good and evil, goes out of business. And time marches on, and certain places that you reference get torn down and so forth. But that's
yeah,
nothing.
and that's like well, it's funny because like I was just talking to a buddy of mine about this, and just like Kevin's, for instance, right? And speaking of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, like it's funny, right? I'll go back and rewatch because I want to finish the whole series at some point. I think I missed like 3 seasons, some of the in betweens, and important episodes and stuff. But like, yeah, like there's like it's like tech, right? Where they're like pulling out a car phone. So and like Angel's like that too, right? It's like and so some of the things, so it's like but like Kevin's is like that too, where like they'll be talking about like there's some of those pop culture references where some people are like, oh, this is old or whatever. It's like, yeah, because you kind of had to be there. It's like Psych, right? There was a lot of pop culture references. But yeah, like I think that's the test of time for some books, right? Like it's
Something
funny.
like it's 1999. I was watching some little thing on YouTube about it, and they had these tiny little TV screens,
Oh, yeah.
round screens that everybody's looking at. It looked so high tech at the time, and then now it's like, you know, thanks, Gramps.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah. I had my dad had one of those for yeah, like the Tigers games and stuff. So if we went somewhere in the summer like fishing or something and we were on like, the shore or whatever in between, yeah, he could catch the games. Totally forgot about that. But yeah, there's all sorts of stuff like that, right? That to me is like really interesting. But that's the thing I think it's fun about sci-fi though, right? Is like there's so many things that you can look at that people are thinking of. And I follow some of these Instagram accounts they're just like amazing. And my buddy really likes motorcycles, so there's always these air cycles or whatever, that the Japanese industries are working on.
Cycles, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they're so cool.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
particularly on Charlotte driving, where it's around here. It's never a question of if you get hit; it's just when and how often. This town has got the worst driving in the history of automobiles.
Think anybody can drive after the pandemic. Like we almost got hit like 3 times on the way back from your mother-in-law's yesterday. I'm just like, guys, I'm like, we're like 40, not even like 40 minutes from home. I was like, can we just figure it out at some point? But that's why I always like iRobot where they had like the self-driving cars. I
Right.
want that because you could just read or write in your car and it just drive you there. I'm not a big fan of driving anymore because of other drivers. So
So
I always want something like that.
some people thought that 1984 was a blueprint. Other people apparently thought Mad Max was a blueprint.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh man, yeah. Talk about that. Well, it is interesting, right? For some of those dystopian things where, but I talk about this in my history class because they're reading some dystopian, novels and things like that. They're doing like a particular unit for one of the grade levels. So they actually asked me this question. They're like, how come, some of these things are coming true? And I was like, well, if you really look at this like 68-year cycle that a couple people had put out recently, I can't remember if it was like Harvard or who it was, the study where it's literally like so interesting. And I was like, if you kind of match up some of these things, right, you can kind of actually see some of these events that are transpiring again with these enduring issues. So for me, it's always interesting, I think, to right take them into a science fiction aspect, right, and then kind of see how people or characters play in that sandbox with different technology, or different things.
Well,
I mean, that's all George Lucas did. So
all science fiction is an extrapolation of what's going on now.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
From Star Trek commenting on the dirty little wars of the 20th century, which are the
yeah.
21st, to overpopulation, to uh, racial unfairness and hostility. You know, they were talking about us now, not theorizing that in the 24th century, this society will be this way, because we have no real idea of what the 24th century society will be. And I kicked mine out. I went on to the 28th so that,
Oh, cool.
I wouldn't overrun it because that's something also I think, not that it was a real prospect, but you sometimes see that science fiction gets overrun by reality. I mean, if you look at, some of the
Well,
stuff that we have now,
oh, I think Back to the Future 2 is a great example, right? Like they thought we're gonna have all this stuff, and it's like we're not even anywhere close to that.
you
So
can't even get back to the moon.
yeah,
That's the great old science fiction series. They had such hope for us, but by 2000 we would be, in orbit of Jupiter and, you
yeah,
know, Alpha Centauri by 2025. And now
yeah.
it's like, as Jakar said in Babylon 5, go back to your own time. The future is not what it was cracked up to be.
What a great show. Have you ever seen Dark Matter? That old Canadian sci-fi from the Sci-Fi Channel?
No,
Oh man, I keep telling all science fiction writers and authors and gamers, everybody's got to check that out. And it was on Netflix for a while, but yeah, like everybody, the crew wakes up and none of them have a memory of who they are. So like the whole first season and second season, they like slowly start to regain. But yeah, like it's got to be one of the best representations of sci-fi, I think, from like because there were like some other ones too that were good at that time, but I think that was like I like the best one I've seen. But yeah, like it they talked about these corporations taking over like outer space and stuff. And I'm like,
we happen, yeah.
yeah, and I'm like, more and more now, I'm like, ooh, like, I don't know. To me, that seems more and more, likely based off of current political trends and just different stuff. So I was like, oh, maybe these guys really did have like a really good point. But yeah, some of the world building there was just like was really cool. But some of the tech in there was like really awesome too. But yeah, like, but there were some things where, yeah, I definitely think like because I think they're at like 20 like the 27th century, I think is what they chose. But I thought that that was an interesting like choice. And it's always like Firefly too, right? Where it's like, I always thought it was interesting like their thing, right? Was like Earth that was or whatever. And I always think we really got gypped because I would have loved for them, to come, have come back and stuff and to see kind of historically like what it's like and whatever. But yeah, it's always interesting, I think, to see where people kind of plant that timeline flag, particularly for science fiction, because it always makes me wonder, like, would that be how things go, or like that kind of thing. I think it's cool.
I wanted to push mine out to where it seemed like, galactic civilizations were
Yeah,
possible, where starships were, if not common, not uncommon. I don't
yeah,
want starship travel to be like getting on a 737 and going to Chicago. I wanted to have a voyage aspect. And in my universe, the fastest thing is Starship because it's the only thing that exceeds the speed of light by essentially leaving our universe and coming back in another one. One of the things I did, and Larry Niven, I think, really kind of pioneered this
mm,
when he did all of his stuff in known space. You invent the races and the technologies and so forth at the one time.
mm,
So that's what I did because I write four different series, three of them science fiction. The three science fiction ones are all set in the same universe. So I only have to
oh, cool.
how things work one time. And it also allows me to
Yeah,
sort of overlap the characters, even though there's a fair spread of time in there. And it allows me to deepen and enrich the experience because you're seeing these races again. You have some idea how they function, what they value, and so forth. And
yeah,
I found that to be the easiest way to do that. And like I said, that Larry Niven pioneered it. CJ Cherry kind of did that with her stuff. I think she may have done somewhat retrospectively, but it works out because when you're approaching science fiction, if you get stuff that you like, you want more of it. And the biggest just
yeah, yeah,
finding out that there were two books in that series, or that the guy never came back, or the woman writing it never came back to that universe and gave you more entrees. So the good thing is, if you like this stuff, that there are about 20 books worth of it.
That's awesome. Well, I definitely agree with you though, because like I have said, my urban fantasy series, but like I have some I'm pushing some sci-fi. things as well, for particular reasons. And I have like a Men in Black, have a company, they're called The Company. And like particular, they don't just pick anybody, like they pick people for a particular reason, which I think is cool. I came up with, it goes through the series, and I was like, well, instead of making this separate, I was like, it would actually be cool to have it be part of my urban fantasy series and have, these two characters kind of like, like Will Smith and everybody, coincide with my Monster Hunter and his other peeps, because I was like, oh, it's just kind of cool, I think, to push. I've seen people do this, and I was like, oh, it's kind of cool to do that. And I have like another series where it's like a secret organization for like the United States and the world, where it's like they have aliens that will like work with like one crew member, right? So you got like this I have like an African American gentleman who's like ex special forces and stuff, and he runs his own starship essentially with a coalition of like aliens, and then they go and they're at the disposal of like a world organization that has like a military branch of the UN essentially. But I was like, yeah, I did the same thing. So I was like, it's going to be interesting to do this. And I thought it would be really cool to bleed magic and urban fantasy and sci-fi together, where some things I have from a particular place are urban fantasy, but then I could have my aliens come in too. And I thought it would be cool to have the people in the company have to really like work with both. And I was like, I've seen a couple people do some cool stuff. And I'm totally blank on what the author's name was, but I bought a bunch of her books. And it's kind of like a sci-fi, like romance, like series. And I was like, oh, it'd be really cool to kind of combine that with urban fantasy. But now I'm like kind of nice because I got my one sandbox and I can decide some of my magic system, if you will, for I have a particular reason, and I kind of threw everything together, and it kind of fit, and I was like, oh, this is really neat, and I'm kind of interested to see how I can, kind of take some of those sci-fi tropes and kind of combine them with some urban fantasy for, just a little bit more flavor. But yeah, it's nice because now I got the same sandbox and I'm like, I could take all these different people and do something really cool with. So I totally agree. I think it's smart to do that way. It took me a while to figure that out, I think. Like, yeah, the 3-for-1 specials, I like to call it, but it's so much easier to do world building that way, right? Instead of trying to, yeah, like keep everything separate. So I think if you can do that for fantasy or for sci-fi or whatever, I think it's just so much easier that way.
Crossovers can be fun too, because one of the characters in the first series I wrote in the Privateer series is a woman named Shasky Rainhelm, 6'9", genetically engineered assassin, who is the only reason my everyman character, who basically that's the story of one man's search for his wife's lost starship. She's a naval
Mhm.
officer, her ship goes missing. He's a corporate dude, leaves the corporate world, buys a ship to go looking for her. This guy is not prepared for the tough world of a privateer, and probably wouldn't survive that long. I mean, he's one of us. He's not Captain Kirk. He's not the guy from Firefly. What is the guy from Firefly's name?
Oh, Mal.
Mal. He's not Mal. So this is a guy descending from normal life into the very difficult life of a privateer. And the reason he survives is one of the first people he meets, he picks up and actually saves her, so she's under some obligation to help him out, is Shasta Rainhelm, who is uh, lethal, incarnate. Um, she's 6'9", black hair, green eyes. I mention that because the character of Morrow is 5'4", black hair and green eyes, and this is the alien AI who, when she reawakens, found by an expedition on an asteroid, tries to pattern herself as a human female. Doesn't quite get it right because she accidentally patterns herself after a game set. So she
Mm.
actually looks like, kind of a Japanese anime character. But the two of these characters actually meet, and they both have artificial origins. Shasti Rainhell was just made up of the genetic material of thousands of people in a lab, and Morrow was originally made as an AI for war, and she's adopted this appearance, and she's adopted her gender. And a lot of the books are about what it means for her to do that, to inhabit that female identity. But they kind of meet, and they kind of feel this commonality because they almost look like a 6'9" and 5'4" version of the same person. And so that was a fun aspect that I didn't realize until they actually came face to face in the universe. And the relationship that developed between them is an interesting one too. And none of this is planned by me. Again, I'm like a lot of writers. I'm walking the distance between New York and LA at night with flashlight, and I can only see 20 feet ahead. But it's an interesting 20 feet, so it keeps me going.
Yeah. That's fair. Well, that's like with the whole Avengers craze, and like people still, I feel like, want that. I was like, oh, I'm gonna take urban fantasy and I have some characters because I had some different ideas for characters from different genres and things. I
Mhm.
had this like Valkyrie character, and I was like, oh, it'd be really cool to have her in my urban fantasy world as like her own series and have her join the team with my Monster Hunter. Have my friends, I'm a martial artist, so they for so long want me to do like level progression fantasy. And I was like, I just can't right now. I just don't have it. But I took a character idea and had like the Jade Sentinel, and it's like this universal protector, kind of
Mhm.
like Shang-Chi or Iron Fist kind of thing. So
Mhm.
I have him. So I was like, they're like, okay, that's like satisfied them. And I was like, oh, it's kind of cool. Takes over for like his grandfather and stuff. Joins the team. So at some point, I have another character too that I'd like to add, but I'm gonna like put like an urban fantasy like D&D party together and do like their own like trilogy to like save the universe and stuff. And then later on, I can kind of, like play with everybody, like how I want, put them on different boards and stuff. But I love when people do that. Like I love with Patricia Briggs, and she does it every so often with her Alpha and Omega series and Mercy Thompson. I want to do it to more degree because that's what I like. Like I don't know if you remember like where like the original like like Hal Jordan, Green Lantern, and Green Arrow, like they were the first ones really to do like the team ups and stuff. Those were always, I think, some of the best heroes for hire, stuff like that.
Well, and there was the famous Conan versus Elric of Melniboné one. Yeah.
Oh man, we're talking about like so with the new with Titan buying Conan, they were talking about trying to do a newer version of that, but I don't think they've been able to figure out the rights. But I'm hoping that they can just figure it out because it would be such a cool like crossover with especially the new writers and artists they have through Titan are just incredible. I was so happy when I found out that they bought like Conan like the rights and stuff. But yeah, I just think that would be it would be so cool. I'm still tracking down that original issue. I
I
had one, but
had
then
that at one time, and
yeah.
unfortunately, I let it go. I love the sword and sorcerer stuff because
Oh yeah, yeah,
you mentioned that you're a martial artist too.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
What's your discipline?
Oh, I do. Well, I did Taekwondo for a while, so I have a secondary black belt in that. Right now, I'm doing Washinryu karate, so I had my first brown out of three for that. And then I was doing jujitsu for a while and judo, so I have like a blue belt for judo. I'm trying to get my first brown belt for that. I had hurt myself, so grappling was a little rough for a while, so I took some time off when life happened. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'd like to go back. I'd like to get my black belt for karate. That's always been like one of my goals. And then I'd like to kind of go back to judo and jujitsu again. But yeah, it took me a while to get my back and stuff figured out. So I'm like, I've been on a slow journey recovery for it. But
Uh,
yeah, how
I'm
about
a,
you?
I'm a black sash in Kung Fu,
Oh, nice. That's
called
awesome.
Lai Kung Pai, and so I'm an instructor with Thunder Wave Martial Arts.
Oh,
I
cool,
do
cool.
Kung Fu, and I've done some Taekwondo and some Tai Chi. What I presently do mostly is weapon instruction. You
Oh,
know,
cool.
the art of teaching people to kill other people with sharpened bits of metal. So naturally, anything to do with swords and so forth. Because on Wednesday nights, I'm usually fighting with a sword.
Oh,
Uh,
cool.
we use a full fencing mask and we use rugby gloves because otherwise, we'll put it this way: this finger used to be straight. Uh, but it's a martial art, so you expect it to put up with these things with a good grace. But it also does it gives me some unique opportunities. For example, in the first book was Once a Hero, I had a mass fight on Mars between three of my characters and who were protecting the fourth smaller character. And there's about 25, 30 people that are attacking them. Well, when I was at one school, we had about 25, students in there. And I got myself and two of the other instructors in a circle and just basically had the entire class attack us. And the mechanics of that actually worked out the same way they did in the short story. The
Oh, that's
aggressive
cool.
ones press forward, the less aggressive ones hover in the background looking for an opportunity. There's some people who kind of don't want to do it at all. The aggressive ones come in, you deal with them and so forth. And their numbers often impede them, as much as they give them an advantage. So you found that by being in a tight group in the center, that you could, in fact, last in this sort of thing, as opposed to going down instantly. Because you see things all the time in both books and movies, and I won't name the author, but when every once in a while you think, oh, geez, am I actually good enough to write something? And then I have a guy who is prisoner of three very tough aliens, bound to a chair, manages to bounce around the room and knock out three aliens. And it's like, knocking out people is hard in the first place.
Yeah.
And when you do knock them out, you're gone 90% of the way to killing them. So it's not something, that should be that casually done. And it's just like, okay, if this guy can write this in the series book, I can write it. And it's also one of those things where this stuff is so difficult. If you're fighting with even a light sword and you're past 5 minutes with it, well, when you pick that light sword up, metal, hard plastic, whatever it was, it weighed nothing. After about 5 minutes of this, and you're whacking away with somebody who's half your age and chasing your butt around the floor, it starts to weigh. After 10 minutes, it starts to weigh a lot more. So I think their having a martial arts background gave me some underlying verity to some of the stuff that I was doing. Just like parachuting gave me some verity.
Yeah.
I've got to jump in there, and the character goes through what I did on my second jump, which was I was upside down when the static line went off, and you go like really fast, and it kind of reorients the world for you. So while I don't think you have to be a commando or have necessarily all of the experiences you're writing about, to the extent that you do have them, I think it does give some underlying verity to what you do. If when you're firing a weapon, you mention that coppery taste you get in your mouth when you're doing it, that tells somebody else that's done that you have this experience.
Yeah.
Pulling it out of your butt entirely. So
No, that's very true.
useful.
Yeah. Well, that's like I got my Monster Hunter is like a ex-Marine, but like in Prequel Novel 1, he's in the Marines. So like I'm like, say people keep asking like, what's your release date? I'm like, I gotta finish X, Y, and Z. I have to fix these things now because I messed up the timeline. And now currently what's going on in Iraq, there's more of like a counterintelligence sort of thing. And then now you have a coalition of different people. So I think today I'm going to be changing characters and instead of having them all be American, but it's like hard, right? Because it's like there's current tactics that aren't being shared. I have friends that were in the Marines that are going to read just for combat sake and things like that, because I want people, veterans to read it for both characters, in particular, who are veterans. One's from Marines, one's going to be from the Army. But yeah, I want those things to be, realistic. Some of the things it's a little different, right? Because yeah, like nobody really knows unless you're currently there, like what's going on. But yeah, like my friend, he was like, oh, like he goes, why didn't you lean more into? So I'm changing two combat scenes, and one in particular, like they're going into a situation where they're not trying to kill people, but they need to infiltrate. So my friend was like, oh, you should have went deeper into some of the martial arts and stuff. So I'm actually changing that scene because he's like, this is what he's like, I really thought you were gonna lean more into it. So thank you, Dan, for calling me out on that. But yeah, it's hard, right? Because like I'm more of a bow guy, and I mean I hunted for a while with my dad and stuff, and I'm a country boy, so we used to target practice and stuff, but like I've never fired an automatic weapon. I've never fired more that many pistols and stuff. It was more shotguns or rifles, those kind of things. So yeah, like I'm going to be really leaning into some of my friends, right, and their experiences to do that. But yeah, I think if you can find somebody too, right, like you were saying, even if you don't do it, if you can find somebody, right, to help you either in the writing process or in the editing, and to give some feedback. I think it's always personally, I think it's super helpful because when somebody does the knockout, it drives me nuts. So
yeah. Or it also depends a little bit on your POV character. Like
that's true too.
Who's the POV character opposite Shasta Rainhelm, since he was not, Captain Kirk or one of these type of guys, he doesn't know everything that's going on, and particularly in the ground fighting situation. From his point of view, a lot of it's just chaos and screaming and explosions and the smell of something burning. So that would be more my perspective because I haven't been there for that, thank God. Um, but he has the professionals around him that are helping him with this and are doing that. So while it's important to get it right, it also depends on who your character is.
Yeah, true, true.
If he is Captain Kirk, then he has to know everything. But that's also one of the real downfalls that we struggle with in science fiction, is the surely Captain you know moment, which is when I am taking some information that I have to get to the reader somehow,
Yeah.
and I have two military or space professionals talking about it when they wouldn't be, because this is all,
Yeah.
second nature to them and so forth. It's a difficult thing. You try to avoid it if it's at all possible. And if not, you try to make it as the least onerous it can be. You find someone that doesn't know who's asking them what
Yeah.
the hell's going on. And
Yeah. Well, that's like I'm reading Winds of Truth by Brandon Sanderson right now with my best friend for book club, and like they have Wit, who knows a lot more than the reader. I'm just gonna say that. I don't want to give anything away. But like I was like, what a genius. In Will White's Cradle, you have really quickly on, you have a very powerful character who knows way more than the main character
uh,
come in just for a little bit to kind of set the path. And I'm like, that was genius because then at different times we get the story from this person's the main arc from this person's perspective,
uh,
and they check in with the main character. It's like that Obi-Wan, right? Like
uh,
genius to set the character on this type of path and then gets him to Yoda, gets him, I just think like it is really interesting in some of those, ways that people do that, I think makes a lot of sense. Speaking of Firefly, like when you have, oh, why am I blanking? The doctor, right, who's like River's brother, Simon. So when you have
yeah,
Simon, right, he's like kind of like similar, it sounds like to your captain, right? Doesn't know what's going on, really green, rich person, right? Really privileged. But I thought that whole first season was written really well because anytime they're explaining something, they're explaining it really to him, right? Or making it make sense to him. And I think that, that was really smart personally, is like instead
uh,
of, holding our hand, doing it in a more creative way. So I'm always looking for ways, yeah, to do that. I have my main character, then I have another character who so my main character is kind of going to be in that same boat, right? Of like he's learning with the audience. So I have a
uh,
character that's going to be teaching him, two of them who are going to be teaching him along the way. But it makes total sense, right? Is like he would be learning. If you were in his shoes, they would be saying the same thing. So the audience is there as well. But it took me a while to figure out what was missing. So I had this other character who I think kind of does that type of narration and stuff, but through a conversational way. But man, did it take me like 3 years to figure out how I was going to do that. Like, so
yeah,
I don't envy people who have to do
that's
that.
the most subtle ways I saw that done was Kirk to solve it, learn why things work on the starship. She's extremely intelligent, extremely capable, but she's there. And it gives him that opportunity to explain to the audience what's going on. Because it can be astonishing what people don't get. You may think that they should get it. Hunt for Red October, fire off the what's essentially a form of electronic countermeasure. And you see the things pop out, you see the bubble, you see the torpedoes go after them. But I had a couple of friends afterward ask me, well, what was going on? And it was immediately apparent to me because I just knew something about the subject. But despite the fact they're all college educated people, it wasn't apparent to them. One time in one of my books, I said, well, the ramp came down and they jumped to 10,000 feet to the ground. And I had three highly intelligent, college educated women ask me, how could a ramp go 10,000 feet? And I could either think, oh, well, they missed that and so forth, or I could realize I had not given them enough breadcrumbs for
Yeah.
something totally outside of their experience because I jumped out of airplanes and they hadn't. So I went back and rewrote the scene and I had a better scene
Mm,
for it that would be more approachable to everybody. So,
mm.
one also great piece of writing advice, if one person tells you something, you might listen. Two people tell you something, three people tell you something, take the lampshade off your head and sit down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's my current edits, folks. One of my friends goes, "You don't have to change this." I was like, "We haven't read it." I go, "These are three people that volunteered for me that definitely know." I'm like, when one of them is a SPFBO, like Mark Lawrence's contest, like I can't remember if they won or if they were semifinalists. I think they won. So I was like, I'm gonna tend to listen to this person in particular. Then I had somebody else, yeah, who's written like 40 books. So all three of them, my developmental editors, said the same thing. I was like, I think it's time to listen and to pause and just to, make the book better, because I want people to read it, right? So yeah, I definitely agree with you. Yeah, once
You have to
fool
be
me,
true
once
to
twice.
yeah, you have to be true to your own vision at the end of the day. I mean, I write these books primarily so that I enjoy them, and I hope to reach other people and have them enjoy them. But I don't write for an audience or write commercially in that sense that, okay, this is on trend and this is what people are doing. That would be, I could have stayed in the industry that I was in before this if I wanted to do that kind of thing.
Yeah,
And everybody's writing journey is different. Some people have to, write for publication to again live indoors and eat off of plates. Since I don't, I write the stuff that I like, but I expose it. And this is probably, and I think you would agree, one of the most critical things for all writers. Writing groups, critique groups, other people's viewpoints, which are the refiner's fire that burn off the excess, burn out the
yeah,
junk, burn out the plain mistakes.
yeah.
I just got an edited work back from a friend of mine, and I thought it was in perfect shape when I gave it to her. And when I get back, there's 27 times I missed the word. The brain
Yeah,
fills in the work.
yeah,
And even when you read it just before sending it out, you know, you know what you intended and it's there. So it's particularly a line and copy, which I think does not get the respect that it deserves
oh
in
yeah.
the industry. Because a lot of people who have read stuff of mine, and this is a good thing, said they get caught up in the story and they stop editing. But a line and copy editor, a really good one, doesn't do that because
Yeah,
they notice that you said A as opposed to and, you know, and they didn't look past that. And that's what you need so that you're not embarrassed later down the road. And it's difficult because it's expensive. It's hard to find to people.
yeah.
I'm working with somebody now who is very reasonably priced and does a superb job. And I'm just really grateful to have found her.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's always good, I think, when you can find somebody really good. I had a really good fantasy artist, and then yeah, he was like, "Oh, he got a different job," which I like. Good for him, right? Like,
Mhm,
end up making more and stuff, but he's like, "Yeah, I don't have time to do." Like, he'll do something for me, right? If
mhm.
I really need him to, and do an amazing job. But yeah, like, wasn't really. That's like I've been looking for some other people, so I found a really good deal with Tom Edwards of Tom Edwards Design for my first go around for my actual book one for my urban fantasy series. Did an amazing job. I just needed someone to kind of set the tone. Who knows? Maybe I'll sell a lot of them. I can do, buy his covers again for the other books and stuff. But yeah, I think it's always hard to find somebody really good, but like also reasonably priced, and then
So if you look at
usually they blow up,
yeah,
you get too busy.
if you look at all of these covers, with the exception of My Outcast State, which the publisher found somebody in the Philippines who did that one and did a fantastic job, almost all of these are by an artist that I only know as Grand Failure,
Mm.
and they're available on iStock. And
Oh, cool.
they're not AI, because one of the nice things iStock does is they say you don't allow any AI. And you look for a cover that resembles or evokes either a mood or something your character is doing. And in almost all of these, the character is actually performing either the action that you see here or something very similar to it, and either looks like that or looks very, very similar to what image I got. I don't know what psychic link we have with this guy. God bless him. We've used his stuff because in some cases these aren't the original covers. We had
Mm.
that one artist who did My Outcast State, caught the seminal moment of the book, the, did a fantastic job on it. Then we think he kind of outsourced the stuff to
Mm.
some lesser students and got a little too carried away with the anime aspect of it,
Mm.
and so we ended up changing some of the covers downrange. I've also used Cedar Sanderson, who did a cover for me for Privateer. And that was fun because I draw some. So I had a pencil drawing of the scene, which I gave to her, and she turned it into a cover. And,
Oh, that's cool.
and that was a lot of fun, that collaboration. She does really superior work, but I couldn't afford to use her on a 10-book series.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, it's like I like went to get covers, and I had like one that my friend did for me. So I had the beginning cover. And I was like, I need a few things tweaked. And they've done an amazing job. I'm just trying to figure out because like you have to email. So I think like something I'm gonna do a video today because I think something's getting lost, in the translation of the email. But we're so close. But the overall cover was great. Just need like the back cover, the typography to stand out a little bit, but not too much. But yeah, the overall image, they did a great job combining what I wanted in my head. My friend was like, we could just do this, and we just weren't able to get it figured out. But yeah, I'm actually taking my friend has like a company he works for. So I'm gonna use his account. And yeah, like I'm gonna do Photoshop training for like the first couple classes on there. And then I'm going back relearning Illustrator. Because I'm hoping I can just do my own at some point. I do a lot of stuff with Adobe Express and Canva. I actually helped a friend of mine, Ryan Null, with his 2 covers. But yeah, I'm hoping at some point I can go back because I was originally going to be doing illustrating way back in the day. So I'm hoping I can get a drawing iPad at some point, and get back into it and do enough, to at least do novellas, between Photoshop, Illustrator, and a couple of things. But one day I'd like to just do my own, because there's like only so much I think you can convey to people. So for me, it's just easier for some of these if I could just do my own. And I refuse to use AI because I was going to be an artist, and I have so many friends that are artists, and I don't want to take anything away from them. So I'm still looking at times, yeah, for different people. MyBlart's a really good one too. They do a really good job. I've had a lot of friends get some stuff from them. But yeah, it's hard when you find an individual though, like you say, for copy editing or line editing and just different things. Because I think at times it just one of my friends, I'm really excited because I didn't know he developmental edited, and he's worked for Mattel for like over 20 years. He was in the comic industry for a long time, and I love his comic work. And he writes books too. So I'm really excited to hopefully, get him to do my superhero series at some point. But we talked about him doing one of my dark fantasy novella series. So I'm really hoping that I can just like give him work. And him and I communicate really well, I feel like. So I'm hoping that, I can open that up, and get some, yeah, I need to get a new team together. It's hard.
There's a lot of back shop work that goes on here. Well, we get these images from iStock. Helen Harrison is a partner in Copper Dog Publishing with me, her and Michael Hansen. She's the one that turns these into covers. And as you say,
Mm.
there's the text, there's the setup, there's the graphics, there's all that stuff I know nothing about. And it does that for us. And again, we have our thing that we don't use AI because I do some pencil sketching. I don't have the aspiration to be an artist, but I'm learning more as time goes by. My wife is in fact a fine artist, but Shelley Kiefer, she's a pastelist, watercolorist,
Oh, cool.
she's been in magazines and sold nationally, and so forth. So, I had that respect for the artist that, maybe we were shoveling sand against the sea. Maybe we're all King Canute when it comes to the AI revolution, and it's going to be like digital versus film. But in as
Yeah.
much as is possible, I want to stick with the human interface of the arts. How much can we give over to AI and still have humanity left? Hey, that might be a pretty good short story for both of us. Feel free.
Speaking of which,
Mhm.
so I gotta ask this. I know we talked quite a bit about a lot of these questions and stuff, which is totally fine. But I gotta know when you're doing a 10, when you're doing a 5 book cycle and then you got 10, how do you decide which story is going to take place at which time within the series itself? Because I know me, right? I got different ideas. So how do you decide, right? Where, especially if it's like a little bit more episodic, how did you kind of decide this was going to happen in book one, two, three, four, five?
I think I mentioned at the beginning that my method for everything is kind of controlled chaos. So a little bit of that. And again, it's a sort of an organic process. The first series was Once a Hero, which is turned into the Privateer series, you know, became a trilogy. Then some of the surviving characters started out, under the command of Shasti Rainhell in what became Shasti Rainhell's books. And then I jumped about 80 years down the timeline. And actually, some of the Morrow books came before the end of the privateer stuff, so I'd be writing at different timelines, and I just started writing those. When I went to write the last one of the privateer series, every book has to have a reason to be written. It can't just simply be Chastity Rainhill shows up and beats the hell out of something. I had a bit of a love triangle that developed between Robert Fenneday, Lisa Fenneday, and Chastity Rainhill, which is very much the point of the books. I won't get into it too much. Say that a friendship developed between the three that outlasted everything that occurred to them. So at some point, Chastity Rainhill is coming back to protect Robert Fenneday from some menace. And Robert is, with Lisa Fenneday. Lisa's pregnant with their first child. And I thought, well, what will change in this character that's going to make this interesting? And what changed was I realized that Chastity Rainhill, whose Generation X body can do lots of things, including breathe underwater, stored a fertilized egg for something like 12 years. And when she returns to the only place that she ever felt loved and safe, the house of Robert and Lisa's pregnant, her body decides to get pregnant. It doesn't consult her about this. So she's not ready for this. Lisa's having her first child. Chastity's pregnancy is speeding up to match Lisa's. And of course, Robert is the father of both children. So comedic hijinks, as well as other mayhem, ensued. And what then happened after that story is, well, we have children. And I popped 18 years down the timeline until these two half siblings, Dare Fenneday and Stellan Rainhill, who were raised together by Robert and Lisa, with Chastity not being ready for children. Even though he's 7 feet tall and, could throw a car on its side, and she's 5'4", red-haired little Spitfire, everybody calls them the twins because they're inseparable. Well, they decide that they don't want to live in the shadow of their parents, and they buy a freighter and go off on their own adventures. So having started with Was Once a Hero and then started Morrow down here, I'm in the middle now writing the children of Robert, Lisa, and Chastity. And of course, Chastity Rainhill lives into the time frame of Morrow, which means that these young people could live there too. So my trick there is to have enough exciting and interesting stuff occur in this middle series that won't sufficiently change the universe that it would have to have been made or remarked upon in the later series. So what I would tell you, or any other person that was trying to do this, is don't do this my way. Start logically at the beginning, tell the story through to the middle, and then go on to the end. I cannot do that. I don't plan anything that I write. I sit down and mercifully, every time I face a piece of blank paper, something comes out. And I usually actually write on paper initially, then first draft is going in there. And I don't necessarily even use the stuff that I wrote, not line for line or verbatim. It's the inspiration that I get.
Yeah.
I tend to write in scenes. It's always like a movie plays in my head. And this scene occurs in it, and I write the complete scene. And then I have a scene over here and a scene over there. And it's a little bit like putting together a puzzle. If you have scene A, B, C, and F, the spaces, the holes between them, tell you what goes in there. Again, you have to be kind of a mad, crazy person to write the way I wrote. When I attended Orson Scott Card's boot camp, he told me the first thing you do is that you write page one, and page one must be perfect before you go to page two. And I did not.
Oh.
He said you write in third person past tense because that's the clearest way to tell a story. All of the Morrow books are in two tenses, first person. Morrow's first person present tense. Rick is first person, who is the guy that finds her. Rick Trigard, a failed fighter pilot. He speaks in first person past tense. And it took me 2 or 3 books to realize why they do that. Morrow, the AI, all times are now to her. The first moment of her existence and the present moment of her existence are equally accessible to her. So it's a little bit like an animal existence in that all times are now. So everything is immediate to her. So first person, present tense. Rick, regular human being, first person, past tense. Again, I would say, don't do this. Hit yourself in the face with a brick. It'll be easier. But it's the way that they spoke, and I didn't question. And I'm not just saying, Orson Scott Card, great writer, there with Ender's Game and so forth. But the rules that he operated under, while educational for me, and this is a martial artist, before you start discarding an old rule, you have to master it. That's what Bruce Lee did. He didn't say all previous kung fu is junk. He said, well, there's a lot of formalism in there. Let's learn that, get what there is out of that, and then I'll put it into my own system.
Yeah.
But to think that, to have the temerity to think that you've arrived and you're going to rewrite everything without regard to the past is just arrogance, in my opinion. So I learned everything I could learn. But at the end, I write my own way because, I have to do this to make myself happy. There's really no point in it. If I'm not excited by, caring, and emotionally moved by what I write, there's absolutely no reason you should.
Yeah. Well, I just read a book. Unfortunately, I really like the author, and I like the story, but like I got done with it after 308 pages, and I'm like, I didn't really care, like, and I was just like, I wanted to so bad. There's a second one, so I'm hoping that maybe that was fixed. I think it was it's a particular how do you put it, the particular product that they want to keep out there, so they're like, oh, we're going to make books on this. And I think it's like the Netflix, I call it like the Netflix effect, right? That like they're going to put out movies, but like, are you putting out good movies? Right? Like,
Right.
like if we put Jason Momoa, and I think this is going to be a great movie, and Dave Bautista together, right? Everybody's going to watch it. Well, I'm worried because there's been some that have been really good like that, right? But like Ryan Reynolds with Samuel L. Jackson, The Hitman's Bodyguard, first one was hilarious. It was one of the best movies I had ever seen in theaters. So I don't know how the second one was because I didn't see it, but like I wonder, right? Like sometimes they just do that. So I was worried about this book going in, but I was like, oh, it sounds really good. My thing got done, and I'm like, yeah, I didn't really care about the characters. Like nothing really emotionally hit me.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, and it really hit me as a writer because I'm like, oh, I really don't want that to happen with anything anybody, reads from me. Like there's got to be some sort of, like I love those, right? Like with Jim Butcher, like I'm reading the Dresden Files, book 14, book 13, like gets done, and I literally cried with one. And I'm not a big crier for period, or but like with books, right? With media, like period. So like R.A. Salvatore's made me cry like 3 times.
Mhm.
And then with the Drit series, and then Jim Butcher now is on there. And like I was just not expecting this thing that's happened, right? To emotionally hit me that hard. Especially like, yeah, I was just like not expecting it. My wife's like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "I bawled like a baby in this chapter." Like,
That's a great
like,
compliment for the writer. There
yeah.
there are passages in here I can't, in my stuff, I can't read. Somebody else
Mhm.
have to read them because I'm going to get choked up when I do it. I'm
Yeah,
comfortable with my emotions, doesn't bother me.
yeah.
First time I watched Little Matchstick Girl, the Disney silent version of it, man, I was wrecked, totally wrecked. I didn't know the little girl died. I was, my
Oh yeah,
wife
yeah.
was like, oh my God, you didn't know, because
Yep.
I was, you know, I would like to wade it in there and, bash some heads together. I was
Yeah.
that I was upset by it. And that's a
Yeah.
tremendous compliment to the people that do this. If you feel genuine, real emotion when watching or reading something, wow, what gets better than that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nope, I totally get that. I know we're winding down on time here, but I gotta ask you this question, particularly with some of the characters that you've mentioned. So if you could ask any of your characters a question, which character would it be, and what would you ask them?
Oh my gosh. The person is easy. It would be Mara.
Okay.
Mara, a 50,000-year-old AI. Um, I guess the question I would ask, and it's funny because she actually answers it on the last page of the last book, is, "Are you happy?"
Oh, that's a good one.
Because we deal with so often in science fiction the intersection between non-life and life and between artificial life and life. It's not something we understand because we can't create life. We can't even take something that was alive and bring it back to life, Frankenstein notwithstanding. And as much as wonderful stuff as there is in AI and computing, I think there's as much chance that this pen over here will become sentient as there is that our computers will. It's not to say that they won't get complicated, not to say that they can't take stuff that we give them and go places we can't follow with it, but that's taking stuff that we give them. We're kind of the gods of computers. We create them. We may not be able to control them, but we give them the parameters of existence. Whatever they do comes from the original programming. And that existential issue is a little bit what I deal with the character of Mara, in that she's actually the only self-aware, sentient, artificial person in her universe. It hasn't happened otherwise than otherwise. You have some very, very sophisticated AIs. They haven't made that leap to sentience to being artificial people. So it's a lot about that question of existence. Mara wonders if she has a soul. She wonders if there's a God out there that listens to the pleas of AIs. So that we cruise through that intersection. Particularly Star Trek is terrible about this. If you leave a coffee cup on a desk for 6 weeks in Star Trek universe, it's going to demand membership in the Federation. Everything has become alive. Holograms, everything. I've always thought that they go too far with that, but they also have to produce an episode every week.
Yeah, that's fair.
But the gap between life and unlife is huge. Even now, we have no idea how life came to be on this planet. We've been studying it, for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Really studying it probably only for tens of years, because it's only now that we have the science to really do this. The study of it was, a God did something, So that didn't really advance the vision much. So that is always an interesting area, I think, to explore.
No, that's cool. Well, I think that's a great question. And I love the plug-in for the last book too. It's perfect. So we came full circle there. So I think that's awesome.
Didn't that opportunity, did I?
I like that. That's how it's done, folks. That's how it's done. People always ask me, how do you do that? Check this episode out. You see how it was done. Well, Edward, I know that I want to make sure I leave time for this last question. I know this is one of the a lot of people in the audience tell me this is their favorite. They love seeing what you guys have going on. Do you have any news, updates, current projects, anything like that you can share with us before we head out for the day?
Sure. Well, again, Mara over here, she has at least one book of short stories now completed, which is kind of fun because it allows me to visit her at her earliest period and toward a middle period to sort of see her development. And also it gives me a chance sometimes to do things I couldn't do in the books. Like have a third person POV character who's wandering around with her and is beginning to realize that the pretty little girl next to him is not a little girl. So that there is that. So that's been tremendous fun to do. And there may be more of those. That's always up to Mara. She has to tell me that the story is worth doing. I'm worth it. I'm working on the second book in the Sci-Fi series. This is always a little hard to do here.
Oh, I know. Oh, looks great.
And this is the children of Robert Clinton and Shasty Rainhouse as they're on their adventures. There may or may not be another Shasty Rainhouse book. And the other thing that is up is we looked at the better time.
Oh, there we go.
We looked at Knight Charlotte. This is the second in that series, Oni-chan, where Jeremy Leclerc, our Knight Templar of Charlotte, with his incarnate guardian angel Shadowheart. They defend us from things that go bump in the night. He encounters the ghost of a Japanese girl murdered here in 1932. So we have that one out. And then there's another one on that, which is sort of a fun project. It's called The Drear, which is a particular nightmare of mine that haunted me since childhood, which interestingly enough, since I wrote the book, The Drear, has disappeared entirely out of my mind.
Oh, interesting.
Jeremy Leclerc called to New York City to investigate a part of New York that disappeared about 100 years ago.
Mm.
what happens from that point. So there's usually some project in the future for me. I don't intend to stop writing while I'm moving. This is I don't intend to stop kung fu or tai chi practice while I'm down. And as I intend to get better at ballroom dancing, which is put it this way, my martial arts masters tell me I move like a dancer, and they mean it as a compliment. My dance instructor tells me I move like a fighter, and she does not mean it as a compliment. So there's still room for growth and improvement.
Definitely understand that. I used to help one of my friends. She was a U of M figure skater, like on their team or whatever. And she was really good in her teen years. And yeah, so she started karate at a friend of mine, like they were training and stuff. So then in college, she would want to come train with my friends and I and stuff. And I would try, and she did a good job. But then she would try to teach me how to dance. Did not, yeah, it's not. You think it'd be transferable for everybody? It is not. For some people, it is. I am not one of those.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for whatever reason, fighters, it does not transfer between fighting to dance.
yeah,
It's a struggle, but it's a
yeah.
struggle worth having.
Yeah, it's funny. I want to remind everybody you can find all of Edward's links in the description of this interview, anywhere where you're watching, listening. Please make sure you guys, check out his book, social links, YouTube channel, all those fun things. If you guys could, we were really trying to make sure people are reviewing those products as well. I actually have a video I'm shooting after this for my friend Ben Shankman for his newest book, Arc I read. My Brother's Keeper is amazing, so I cannot wait to type up the rest of my review, send it to the internet, as Johnny Lawrence says, and post the video. So please make sure that's our main focus. Has been for 4 seasons. I guarantee you it's going to be that way for another 4. But that's the best thing you can do to help everybody out. Really appreciate everybody checking us out today. Edward, thank you so much. This has been great. Can't wait to chat again in the future and see what you got cooking. If you need anything, let me know. Feel free to post in the podcast group I have on Facebook. I could send you the link. If you have anything, some people are just busy. You can always send me stuff as well. I don't mind posting it for you. I do that for people all the time, whatever's easier for you. But you let me know what myself and my team can get out there for you, and we'll help you to the best of our ability.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity. This has been a lot of fun. Been like two guys sitting around talking about their favorite stuff. So
I know,
all
right?
we needed was a beer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little early here. I'm about to get hungry for lunch. I can't do it before noon, but yeah, I had an interview a while back, and it was like Books and Brew, and yeah, it was like we had to reschedule. So like for me, it was like 10:30. My friend was drinking. I was like, I can't really. And I was like, it's just one of those people. It's got to be like afternoon. Yeah, he was laughing. He's like, I'm so sorry. We could have done X, Y, and Z because of the time difference. I was like, it's fine. I was like, I don't drink too much anyway, but yeah, every once in a while I like something sweet. So yeah, it's got to be, yeah, getting there though. Maybe I'll take my wife to lunch. We'll see see if she can
Oh,
drive back.
that's a good idea. Always a good
Yeah. That's fair. Well, Edward, you have a great rest of the day, my friend. I'm sure I'll talk to you on social media. I'll send you this follow-up email and we'll get you all situated. Sound good?
Sounds good. Thanks again.
All right. Yeah, not a problem. Thank you.